Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Vanden Ness of the Richmond Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to a performance entitled Our Pictures, the first installment of the Chamber Music Society of Central Virginia's commissioning project inspired by Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. This is the 14th and final concert in the Gellman Room concert series. However, there will be one additional concert beyond the season by the Chamber Music Society on Saturday, June 4th, 3 weeks from today. Now, please join me in welcoming Jim Wilson of the Chamber Music Society of Central Virginia.
Thank you, everybody. Boy, I don't think I've seen all these faces and have been in this room in 2.5 years. So this is a really exciting day for me. I'm so happy to see you all. I'm happy to greet everybody that's streaming right now. That's wonderful. I'd just like to talk about today's program. It's very unusual. It's you know, when you open a restaurant, there's always a soft opening for your friends. That's not the real start. Today's concert is a kind of hybrid of a concert and a soft opening. It's the first 3 installments of a commissioning project that CMSCVA thought of about 2 years ago, that we wanted to really commission a lot of pieces from local composers based on everything Richmond. And our inspiration for this was the famous Mussorgsky suite called Pictures at an Exhibition. And in that piece, Mussorgsky went to an art opening of a friend of his and saw all these wonderful images during the show. And later wrote a piece of music. I think there's 10 pieces all strung together that represent different artwork found in that exhibit. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if somebody commissioned a series of pieces based on things found in Richmond? You know, because this is such an artistic place. And not only music, but as we all know, visual arts are very important here. It's a very historic place with a lot of history, a lot of historical objects, a lot of beautiful places to go, lots of dance, and lots of poetry, spoken word, and drama. So I included all of those in our concept of what a picture could be. And the three kind of first commissions that we have for today are by Antonio Garcia from VCU, jazz professor, from Donovan Williams, who's a super, super talented high school senior that many of you know him in many of his endeavors like sports and playing violin and whatever else he does. It's just amazing. And then from Zachary Wadsworth, who grew up in Richmond and now he teaches at Williams College in Massachusetts. And these are all people that we kind of had our radar on. And this is an ongoing process because today is just the first installment. I personally am hoping for 6 or 7 pieces eventually in this whole suite. So stay tuned. Probably the whole suite will be ready by the fall of 2023. And then if you come to that concert, you can hear the pieces that you'll hear today put in that larger context of work. Anyway, super exciting for this. I'm also really happy to welcome all my musicians. Yeah. Please read about them in the program. If you have the QR code program that has all the bios of everybody, and you'll want to read all about them because they're all phenomenal musicians with a huge range of talents and skills. And just, I'm so fortunate to work with people like this. And we also have a special guest on today's program, one of the artistic inspirations for one of the pieces. And that's Donovan Williams set a poem by Roscoe Burnham's as his inspiration for his piece. And Roscoe's here. I see him. And I actually asked, since Roscoe was going to be here today to perform his poem, Anthem from Removal, I thought it'd be great if Roscoe just performed an opening welcome poem for all of us. So, Roscoe, if you
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I'm really, really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this event for quite some time. And you all look lovely. Well, at least the top half of your faces look lovely. When my favorite poet said that spoken word was the art of getting to know God for a living, what I heard was that art will reveal the reality of God. Spoken word, psalms of today, songs of yesterday, poised pain and prose, scripted tablets to Facebook pages, pages of prayer pasted blogs, pontificated performed pieces of God's agenda. I never believed that God had a gender. I think that God is art, purest form of self-expression, love in love with the idea of, thus making self-creation the great I am, finished into a complete sentence structured to conjure images. I don't think that God is a poet. I don't think that God is a poet. I think God is poetry. Evolution in haiku. Immaculate conception conjugated by consonants and vowels, the all-knowing, all-spark of alliteration, transformed, transcending formation, leads me to think that maybe my trans fam be trying to get closer to God, the way we all are. Like, ain't we all made in the image of God? Ain't poetry all about imagery? Who am I to tell anyone that the poem they see in the mirror isn't the poem they are meant to be? But if God's got a gender, well then God must have a race. Now I could race to conclude that God is black and looks like me, but if God looks like me, how can God look like you? I told a white woman I saw God in her. She said she saw the same thing in me. I don't think that God is a painter. I think that God is paint. Graffitied portraits of divinity, a mixed media mastermind mastering itself as a craft, crafting neon neo-pastel personalities, a sketch of the future, visions of a sketchy past, fingers, paint brushing problems on blank paper so we can draw our own conclusions. But listening to our own voices, we sing out segregation, broken down in the beginning to a sample and a soundbite, remixed into religion, a pale skin and beard, or a dreadlock rock star prophet, Allah and autotune, Christ chopped and screwed by man, but God ain't no singer. No, God is a song written by dance and vice versa, versed in chorus, choreographed chords by Pleiades, life-saving cliches from step, fall, change whose measures resemble meteors, whose silent meditations sound like melodies, who started time with the tick-tock like metronomes, popped in a pulse, locked us into life, put the world on its axis from a clockwise backspin. God is a four-part harmony heard from four corners of the earth, an R&B run over a rock ballad solo with a guitar made of stars who simultaneously boom bap the Big Bang Theory. Our creator, whose art is heaven, hallowed be thy frame, thy kingdom sung, spun into Genesis. God is art, and we are its masterpiece. Thank you.
Amazing. Wow. Okay, I'd like to welcome our first composer on the program, Tony Garcia.
I have to thank Jim not only for inviting me to write for this wonderful group, but for inviting me to follow Roscoe Burnham. I have to recognize that I've made new friends through this process, new musicians that I have not met but have been established for a long time, along with colleagues that I've known for a long time on this stage and even some former students, so it's been such a delight. Jim asked if I would let you know a little bit about this first work because it's very programmatic, meaning you can enjoy it on its own, but maybe it makes more sense if you know the parts of it that were inspired by the work that I was asked to check out. And so as part of our pictures, I went down to the Maggie Walker Historical Site and got a private tour during the COVID era from Ethan Bullard, the National Park Ranger in charge. And I got a chance to peruse the public and the private archives and decide what artifact might be of most interest to me in writing music for this group. And so I had been inspired by my previous knowledge of knowing that Maggie Walker had been involved, along with the Richmond Free Press, in creating a streetcar strike in 1904. That was a very important part of our history here. And being a native New Orleanian who has lived here for the last 21 years, streetcars are very important to me. And historically, the streetcar strike in 1904 took place 50 years before Rosa Parks refused to sit in the back of the bus and started the streetcar strikes in Alabama. And so this is an amazing part of our history, our picture here in Richmond, that inspired me to hunt for something that might be related to that in the archive. And what I found is that there are no speeches in the archive related to the streetcar strike. There are wonderful news accounts and various things. So with Ethan Bullard, I went through and found a speech 2 years later in 1906 called Benaya's Valor, in which Maggie Walker encapsulates and summarizes many of the principles behind the streetcar strike in terms of motivating the African-American community to unite behind its businesses, behind its population, and specifically in the case of Benaya's Valor address, behind its women as entrepreneurs, saying that if you invest in the women in the community, great things will happen in the community. So I was inspired by this piece, and then I had the opportunity to think, well, how might I frame it? And I'm a visual person, so I began to see very quickly how I want to frame it. Jim has told me that this group will provide some music on cue to show some of the things that I had in mind. So I had the idea that, of course, the streetcars would operate, and they were operating smoothly, but they were operating segregated. And then there's the opportunity for Maggie Walker to speak to the congregation at St. Luke's and the community that came in, and speak to them and exhort them to support the African-American community in a strike of the streetcar system. And then there's the actual strike itself, where Maggie Said Walk is the title of the piece, where Maggie asked all the African-Americans in the community to walk instead of riding the streetcar, which is not an easy thing to do in the South in the summer. And, but they did that, and so we have this walking theme as well as the streetcar theme, and eventually they overlap. And eventually the streetcar system, as it did in history, it collapsed within months because of the strength of the African American community's strike. And then there's a final plea from Maggie Walker that I drew from her speech, simply asking, won't you help us? And the piece ends, it has that plea in the middle, but it also ends with that, because this is not a happy ending piece. The journey is still going, and it ends with the plea from Maggie Walker, won't you help us? The unique thing, if there is one about the piece, is that almost every melodic idea that you hear after the streetcar theme is taken from Maggie Walker's speech, which the National Park Service allowed me to print in the score excerpts. And so when you hear the cello or the viola or even the bass play a certain melodic idea, it has Maggie Walker's speech above it, and the rhythm of her cadence in speaking is what I'm trying to capsulize in those moments. So they're essentially playing her words, even though we have no recorded words of her speaking, which is one of the very interesting things about as many wonderful things as we have in the archive. We don't have a recording of her speaking at that time. So with that, I guess I will rely slightly on Jim's benefit. I think you wanted to perhaps have a moment of the streetcar cue. Sully, would you be kind enough to play a moment of that? There are times when you will hear the Charlie car bell ring, and so if you'll do that one more time, and the folks who have the first streetcar clangs will join you. So it doesn't get more programmatic than that. And then there are various moments where we'll start with perhaps the walking theme. Because this is where the speech will come out originally. So maybe the first entrance of the walking theme, and then the first melodic work will be, I think it's Celia is on viola, correct? So let's have a little excerpt there from your favorite rehearsal letter. Was that she doesn't like jazz. So I was like, Jim, you asked me to write music, and yet I picked Maggie Walker, and she don't like jazz. But when I was going through Mr. Bullard, one of the great things I learned was that she made numerous trips to New York City for her work with St. Luke's and for other reasons as well. And she attended many Broadway shows and musicals of the time, which were, at the time were very clearly influenced by jazz. So I made sure that I didn't write any jazz in this piece, but I certainly used the kinds of rhythms and phrasings that she would have heard in those shows, so I felt like she was on my side. And then, is there any other element you wanted to show, Jim, before we move on?
Maybe just what it sounds like when the streetcar collapses.
So this certain moment you will recognize later in the piece. That's the system collapsing. And I wrote out every single one of those notes. No, it's not true. So once again, I thank the Chamber Music Society for getting into this piece, which has its own, perhaps, craziness of the composer behind it, and for inviting me to share it with you. And I'll get out of their way and let them make music.
feeding him.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Maggie Walker, too, by the way. The next piece is by Zachary Wadsworth, and Zachary can't be here with us, although his parents are here, so I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Zach was partnered with the James River Park System. That is his picture that he chose to represent, and met with the representative of the park, walked around Belle Isle, looked at the river, and was struck by one very Richmond, typically Richmond scene. And that is the area where you can see on the bluff Hollywood Cemetery with the river flowing beneath it, and how poetic and haunting that scene is when you see it from the river perspective. And Zach, you know, being a man who knows a lot about music and is kind of a chameleon and can write in so many different styles wonderfully, really also took his inspiration from the music of Mussorgsky, who wrote the original Pictures at an Exhibition. And for those of you that know that piece, one of the movements in it is called Catacombs. In the orchestral version, the Catacombs is performed by the brass section, and it's a very austere, kind of haunting, very still portion of the piece, surrounded by all these other kind of energetic, colorful things in that suite. And Zach was also really inspired by that moment in Mussorgsky's piece, and also the idea of the catacombs translated directly into the graves and the monuments that he was seeing in Hollywood Cemetery above the river. So this piece that you'll hear is also very picturesque with musical representations. It starts with the representation of the flowing river played by the violins, and then you'll hear the lower strings play kind of the chords that Mussorgsky has in the Catacombs movement, but kind of transformed to a modern world. Very haunting. And that kind of changes into really a modern day representation of the Mussorgsky movement. And I think he writes, an adjective that he writes in it is solemn and sculptural. So, and that's when the strings, we all just play block chords in a very high register, very steely sounding and very still. And then in Zach's piece, then the kind of evocations of the people that are buried in the cemetery start to come out. And these are represented by kind of old-timey, different kind of old-timey melodies that are accompanied by, in some cases, like strumming cello, like a guitar, sometimes by the bass, which sounds like a drum. There's several of those melodies that come out. Eventually, the river keeps flowing, and that's what we end with the piece. The spirits go away, and the river flows on into the modern times and the future. So this is They Rest Above the River by Zachary Wadsworth. Such beautiful music. It's amazing. For the third composer on today's program, we asked Donovan Williams to write a piece, and we matched Donovan with Roscoe Burnham's to write a piece based on one of Roscoe's poems. Roscoe was very generous and sent Donovan several poems of his that he thought would work well in music. And so we thought that we would have Roscoe here as one of our living pictures, as it were, to perform the poem that Donovan's piece is based on, and the poem is called Anthem for Renewal. And is Roscoe here somewhere? He's out and about. Maybe I can have Donovan step up for just a second and speak a little about your piece. Here's Roscoe. Awesome. Good. Anyway, welcome back, Roscoe Burnham.
I was like, I have time to step out for just a second. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. Remarks before reading, like just a little bit about the piece. So this was a piece I was commissioned to write, just kind of centered around a lot of the contention around the statues being removed and what it meant for a person of color living in this city. And so this is what came of it. I know there's been a lot of, it really divided the city, unfortunately, where it probably shouldn't have. But I think sometimes humans have a hard time with perspectives outside of their own. I just think it's just a flaw in humanity. So, where one person may just see a statue, another may see it as a representation of decades or centuries of oppression, a constant reminder of kind of where your place is in the world when you're living in this country. And so to see those things get removed, there's a joy that comes with that, because it almost feels like we're moving in the right direction. This is an anthem for removal. Feels like history repeats, like a song, played so loudly it can't hear the screams in the background. History was sung to me how General Lee fought brave. Same history books left out the slaves he owned and fought to keep. When I see him, I see me, auctioned off like property, or hanging from a tree, or buried in a shallow grave, on the same land where an entire war takes place over states' rights to own me. My skin is still where the real battle takes place. Before it was a war song for my body to be seen as 5/5. The ability to soak in sun without crows picking at my flesh and my freedom. Now I am asking still to matter, to take up space, to be solid and not sold, to be fluid and not fleeing, to be whole and not a hole in my chest. How did my black become so blue and red, but simultaneously end up a footnote in an election, or a foot on my neck? Inside the text of history books are silenced screams, stitched in the spines, trapped in the black necks, snapped necks like branches after a storm. From Civil War to civil rights, America implodes and black and brown bodies suffer the most. And civility is a little white lie you tell your children in classrooms. A fairy tale turned fact. I am my ancestors' voice still screeching like black tires in a long road to feeling free. Until the sky falls like a Confederate soldier, or finally, a Confederate statue, I am holding a raised fist in the smoke and an olive branch looking for a hand to hold. I want peace, I want equality, I want equity, because my life's value is not dollars. My life's value is a priceless joy. 400 years and prayers, and I am still wanting everything that any other human being desires. A place where everyone is given a fair hand and not treated like fair game. And officers aren't overseers, and there are no more screams, and the silence would sound less like a prayer for change and sound more like peace after God answers the prayer. Thank you.
Donovan, do you want to say a couple words about your piece? Donovan Williams, everybody.
Yeah, so thank you all for being here. My name is Donovan Williams. I am a senior at collegiate school, and I do have the fortune of being able to compose for this great group of instrumentalists and have this opportunity with the Chamber Music Society. So very grateful for that. Mr. Burnham said it perfectly. I wrote this piece based off of the Anthem for Removal, and really, without trying to give away much of the piece, wanted to encapsulate kind of the motivation to drive to figure out what we as people, we as a nation, we as a country, we as a world, what do we want to represent? How do we want our marks left on this world? What do we want to stand for? What do we want to fight for? And I hope that this piece inspires you to look internally and hopefully be motivated to inspire and promote change in your communities and change in your worlds and make this place a for real more perfect union. So hope you enjoy.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tony, Donovan, Roscoe. Thank you so much. Thanks to all the musicians, and thank you all. It's just a pleasure to be here and play for you. We're back on June 4th, playing the music by the amazing Undine Smith-Moore. So be sure to turn out for that. Thank you so much. Have a great day.